It's strange, isn't it? How quickly life can change. One moment, you're going about your business, everything just as you expect it to be, and the next moment, it's like the ground beneath you shifts, and you're left standing there, not sure which way is up. I guess it's easy to take everything for granted. Family, love, the things you work hard for, the memories you cherish. And then, just like that, everything can be pulled out from under you. I didn't see it coming. Not really. I mean, how could I? This was Kelly, my daughter. The same girl who I had held in my arms when she was just a baby. The one who used to sit on my lap and call me daddy as we played board games or sat by the fire. I never imagined, never dreamed that she would do something like this. But there she was, standing in front of me, her arms crossed, her gaze icy, as if she were speaking to a stranger. I could hardly believe my ears when she said it. The villa's no longer yours. You're not allowed to come here anymore. Her voice was cold, dismissive, like she was talking about a piece of furniture or some minor inconvenience, not the home that Elizabeth and I had poured our hearts into for years. I couldn't even respond right away. It felt like the words were still hanging in the air, echoing in my head, refusing to make sense. My hands were shaking, but I didn't want her to see it. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. It wasn't the time for a fight, I thought. Maybe she was just angry. Maybe she would come around. But deep down, I could feel the betrayal digging into my chest. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some misunderstanding. She meant every word. I tried to keep my composure, forcing a smile that didn't feel natural. Kelly, this is my home, my villa. What are you talking about? She didn't even flinch. She didn't soften. I don't care, she said flatly, almost as if she were bored. We're here now, and this is where we're staying. You need to leave. Her words hit harder than I had expected. They felt like a punch to the gut, each one landing with the precision of someone who had planned this. My own daughter, who I had done everything for, who I had sacrificed so much for, was throwing me out of the home that meant so much to me. I wanted to yell, to tell her how wrong she was, to remind her of everything I had done for her, how I had worked myself to the bone for years to build a life for her and her family. I had paid for her wedding, covered her college tuition, bought her that car she drove around without so much as a thank you. I had been there for her through thick and thin, but now it felt like none of that mattered. But as much as the anger surged inside me, I didn't say a word. I didn't argue. Instead, I just stood there, staring at her, trying to make sense of what had happened. How had we gone from sharing everything, from a family bound by love, to this? How had she turned so cold? I thought back to the days when I used to hold her close, when she was a little girl, and I promised her I would always protect her, always be there for her. Had she forgotten all that? Was this really the daughter I had raised? The daughter who used to crawl into my lap for comfort, who called me daddy in that sweet voice of hers? But now she was telling me to leave, to just go. The hurt was unbearable. I felt it in the pit of my stomach, twisting, turning, making it hard to breathe. Betrayal has a way of doing that to you. It eats at you from the inside, leaves you raw, vulnerable. You can't help but wonder how it happened. What went wrong? Where did I go wrong? I wanted to fight back, to demand answers, but what good would it do? She had already made up her mind. She had already decided. I could see it in her eyes, the finality of it, and as much as I hated it, all I could do was walk away. For now, I grabbed my weekend bag, the one I had packed with such anticipation just a few hours earlier. The bag that was supposed to hold the promise of a peaceful weekend by the lake. But now it felt heavy in my hands. It was hard to even hold on to it. I turned away from her, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. Every step felt like a retreat, a surrender. But what else could I do? I walked to the door, my heart sinking with every step. I had been betrayed by the one person who should have understood me the most, the one person who I had tried to give everything to. And yet, here I was, walking away from the home that had been the heart of our family for so long. I closed the door behind me, the sound of it shutting, echoing in the emptiness. As I got into my car and drove away, I could still hear her voice in my head, clear and cold. "You're not allowed to come here anymore." I wanted to tell myself it would be okay, that she would realize what she had done, that things would somehow go back to the way they were. But deep down, I knew it was too late for that. Something had shifted, and I wasn't sure if it could ever be fixed. The drive to Lake Tahoe should have been a relief. It was supposed to be my escape, just a few days of peace to breathe, to find some clarity after another brutal week spent juggling properties, paperwork, and endless demands. For a while, all I could think about was the stillness of the lake, the way the water would shimmer under the sun, and how it always felt like a sanctuary for me and Elizabeth. Those were the kinds of thoughts that made the 2-hour drive seem almost bearable. But the closer I got to the villa, the more I felt that heavy knot in my chest. I hadn't even realized how tightly wound I'd been until the stress started to melt away with the sound of the tires on the gravel road. But when I finally pulled into the driveway and saw the villa again, something was off. It wasn't the peaceful retreat I'd been longing for. It felt like I was walking into a stranger's house. There they were, Kelly and Palmer, my daughter, my son-in-law. They were standing on my terrace, sipping coffee in their white bathrobes. I froze, caught off guard. My weekend bag slipped from my hands as I stared at them. It wasn't a visit. This wasn't them just stopping by. They had already settled in. I could feel my chest tighten. The realization hit me all at once. They were acting like they owned the place, like this wasn't my home anymore. And Kelly, her expression, it was colder than I could ever have imagined. She didn't even look surprised to see me. It was like I was the one who didn't belong. Her eyes didn't soften. She didn't even greet me. "You're not staying here," she said, her voice sharp, as if she were talking to a stranger. The words stung in a way I wasn't prepared for. She was dismissing me right there in front of my own home, my own place of refuge. I stood there for a moment, unable to move, unsure how to respond. This was my villa, my home, the one Elizabeth and I had built from nothing, brick by brick, dream by dream. Every inch of it carried memories of her, the laughter, the quiet mornings by the lake, the evenings spent together on the terrace. This wasn't just a house to me. It was a part of my life. It had been our sanctuary, our dream. But none of that mattered to Kelly anymore. To her, it wasn't about the years of memories or the love that had gone into building this home. It wasn't about family. No, to her, it was just a possession, something she could claim as her own. She didn't even care to explain herself, didn't offer a reason for why she was doing this. It was just done. "You're not staying here," she repeated, her tone icy. I wanted to say something, anything, to make her understand. I wanted to ask her why she was doing this, but the words caught in my throat. All I could manage was, "I just want to spend the weekend here. It was a weak request, I knew, but it was all I could say. The thought of being thrown out like some unwanted guest, not even welcomed into the home I'd built, was too much. Kelly didn't hesitate. She didn't pause to think about it. "Well, too bad," she snapped. "You're in the way." Those words hit harder than I thought they would. It wasn't just her refusal. It was the tone, the finality in her voice, like she had made up her mind and nothing could change it. "You're in the way." She wasn't even seeing me anymore. She wasn't seeing her father. She was seeing an obstacle, something that was hindering her, something to be removed. It felt like a punch to the gut. But I didn't say anything. What was there to say? The person who used to call me daddy was now telling me to leave, to get out of my own home. The girl who I'd raised, the one I had given everything to, was treating me like I was nothing. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout and ask her how she could be so cold, how she could forget everything I'd done for her. But I didn't. I just stood there, trying to hold it all together, trying not to let my anger show. The worst part? I didn't even recognize her anymore. This wasn't my Kelly. My Kelly would never have treated me like this. This was someone else. Someone who had turned her back on everything I had done for her, everything I had sacrificed. I tried to hold on to my dignity, tried to keep my composure. But inside, I was breaking. I bent down, picked up my weekend bag, and walked toward the door. Each step felt heavier than the last. I couldn't believe what was happening. How had it come to this? How had I gone from being the father she relied on to the burden she wanted to cast aside? As I walked to my car, I could hear her voice behind me, still speaking to Palmer, still carrying on like nothing had happened, like it was perfectly normal for me to be treated this way. I got into the car, my hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. I didn't even bother looking back. What was the point? I knew what they were doing, and I knew they weren't going to stop. But something inside me snapped. This wasn't the end. I wasn't just going to walk away and let them take everything, not without a fight. As I drove away, I told myself I'd come back. I would. I had to. I couldn't just let them take what was mine without standing up for it. This wasn't just about the house. It was about respect. And I had lost all of mine, not just from Kelly, but for myself. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I would find a way to make them realize what they were doing. And when the time came, they would regret it. 3 days. 3 long days spent pacing in my study, the weight of the situation hanging over me like a dark cloud. I couldn't escape it. I kept hearing Kelly's words in my mind, over and over, like an echo I couldn't outrun. "You're not allowed to come here anymore." It was all I could think about. Every time I closed my eyes, her face, cold, indifferent, would flash before me. Every time I tried to focus, all I could hear was her voice, sharp and final, cutting through the quiet of my thoughts. I had given her everything, every bit of myself, every dollar, every hour I spent working late into the night, building a future for her, for our family. I sacrificed so much, always putting her needs above my own, always trying to be the father she could depend on. And this was how she repaid me? By taking the house I built, the one Elizabeth and I had dreamed of for so long, and giving it away like it was nothing more than an old piece of furniture? I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal itself or the coldness in her voice. She didn't even seem to care. There was no regret, no sign that she understood the weight of what she was doing. It was as if she had completely forgotten everything I had done for her, everything I had given up to make sure she had everything she ever needed. But then, just as I thought I might finally begin to make sense of it all, the phone rang. It was Kelly. I didn't expect to hear from her so soon, but there it was, her name flashing on the screen. My heart skipped a beat. Maybe she had come to her senses. Maybe, just maybe, she realized how wrong she was, how much she was hurting me. Maybe this would be her apology. I took a deep breath and answered, trying to steady my voice. "Hello?" "Listen carefully," Kelly said. Her tone was colder than ever. No softness, no trace of regret. "The villa now belongs to Palmer's parents. You're not welcome there anymore. It's theirs now." I sat there stunned as her words sank in. It was like the ground beneath me had shifted again. Except this time, it wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. Kelly had actually gone ahead and transferred ownership of my home to her in-laws, the place I had spent years building, the place that held the memories of my life with Elizabeth. Gone, just like that. I didn't even know what to say. I just sat there, holding the phone in my hand, my mind racing. "What did you just say?" I asked, trying to make sense of it. My voice came out shaky, but I wasn't about to show her how much she had rattled me. "Kelly, you can't just take my property," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't enough. I could feel the defeat creeping in. What could I really do? She had already made her decision. She had already done it. "Oh, I can, and I am," she replied, as if it was the simplest thing in the world. "They need a place to stay, and you barely even use it. It's time to let it go." Let it go? I felt a sickening twist in my stomach, like I had been hit with a sharp blow. Let it go? This wasn't just a house. This was my home. This was the place where Elizabeth and I had built our lives, where we planned our future together. How could she just brush that aside, like it meant nothing? "Kelly, this is my home," I said, my voice cracking a little. "This is where your mother and I built our life. This is where we dreamed of growing old together." But she wasn't listening. She wasn't even trying to understand. "Oh, Dad, you're being ridiculous," she scoffed. "You're just being selfish. After everything we've done for you, after all the help we've given you, you should be grateful. You should be thanking me. You barely use the place anyway. It's just sitting there. So just let it go." Grateful? For what? For taking my home? For dismissing everything I had worked for? For treating me like I didn't matter? I felt the anger rise in me, but I kept it inside. What was the point in arguing? She had already made up her mind. I was just an obstacle she wanted out of the way. I tried to steady my breath, trying to keep my composure, but the hurt was there, too strong to ignore. "Grateful for what, Kelly?" I asked, my voice quiet. "For what you're doing to me? For taking everything I've worked for and giving it away?" She didn't answer. Instead, she just laughed, a sharp, humorless laugh that sent a chill down my spine. "Well, we'll be moving in this weekend, so don't bother coming back," she said coldly. And just like that, she ended the call. The line went dead. I sat there, holding the phone to my ear, staring at nothing. I didn't even hear the dial tone at first. The silence in my study was deafening, but it wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. Everything felt heavy, like I was underwater, struggling to take a breath. Kelly's words rang in my ears, replaying over and over. "We'll be moving in this weekend. Don't come back." It felt like a sentence, like I had been condemned. My life turned upside down in a single phone call. I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that she had taken my home, or the fact that she didn't even care. She didn't care about the sacrifices I had made for her future. She didn't care about the memories Elizabeth and I had shared there. To her, it was just a house, and I was just in the way. I put the phone down and sat in silence for what felt like hours. Everything had changed, and I had no idea how to fix it. I wasn't just losing a house. I was losing my daughter. And it hurt more than I could have ever imagined. I sat there in silence, staring at the phone in my hand. The weight of Kelly's words hung in the air, suffocating me. The call had ended, but the sting of what she said lingered like a wound that wouldn't heal. My hands were shaking, not from physical exertion, but from the shock of what had just happened. I was angry, sure, but there was something deeper, something colder. I felt numb, like I was floating outside my own body, watching someone else deal with the pain. I wasn't just angry about the house. It wasn't just the betrayal of losing my home, my sanctuary, to strangers. It was everything. The years of sacrifice, the endless hours I had spent building her future, supporting her through every stage of life. The weddings, the loans, the checks I had written without a second thought, all of it came rushing back in that moment. Everything I had done for her, all the things I had given up, the long nights working hard to make sure she never had to struggle the way I did. And now, she was treating me like I was some burden, something to be discarded when it was no longer useful. I realized then that the daughter I had raised, the one I had always thought of as my little girl, wasn't the same person anymore. That girl had grown up to be someone else entirely, someone I didn't recognize, someone who could look me in the eye and take away everything I had worked for without even blinking. She had become someone who saw me as an obstacle, as a source of money and support, not as her father, not as someone who loved her with every fiber of my being. It felt like a punch to the gut. I had always imagined that my relationship with Kelly would be one of mutual respect, love, and understanding. I had believed that no matter what happened in life, we would always have each other. But now, I felt like she was a stranger standing in front of me, and I didn't know how to bridge the gap. The anger burned inside me, but I wasn't going to let it control me. I couldn't. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about something bigger, something more personal. It was about my dignity, my sense of self-worth. Kelly had crossed the line, and I wasn't going to let her or Palmer get away with it. I knew I couldn't just let this go. I had to fight back. For years, I had been the quiet, passive father, always giving in, always doing what was expected of me. I had bent over backward for her, thinking that if I just gave enough, she would appreciate me. But now I saw it for what it was: weakness. She had taken my kindness and turned it into something she could exploit. And that I couldn't allow. That night, as I sat in my study, the reality of it all settled in. I wasn't just fighting for the villa anymore. I was fighting for my dignity. I was fighting for the man I used to be, the one who had worked hard, who had built his life with integrity and pride. I wasn't going to let Kelly and Palmer take that from me, not without a fight. I began to plan. Slowly, carefully, like I had when I built my construction business from the ground up. Every move, every decision would be strategic. I would take back what was mine, not out of spite, not to hurt Kelly, but because I had worked my entire life to earn it. That villa wasn't just a building to me. It was a part of who I was. It was a symbol of my years of hard work, of Elizabeth's dreams, of everything we had fought for together. I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me without a fight. I had already made up my mind. The old Fred, the one who always gave in, was gone. I was no longer the father who would bend to every demand, who would take whatever was thrown at him without standing up for himself. That version of me was dead. This was about protecting what was mine. This was about standing up for myself, for the man I had become, for the legacy I was leaving behind. I couldn't let Kelly think she could just walk all over me. I didn't care how much she had helped me or how much I had done for her. What mattered now was that I had to fight for what I had built, for what I had worked my entire life to create. And as I sat there that night, staring out the window at the darkened sky, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to let her win. I would fight for the villa. I would fight for my legacy. I would fight for the respect I deserved. Tomorrow, I would start making the calls. I would do whatever it took. This wasn't just about protecting a house. It was about taking back control of my life. And I would do whatever it took to make sure I didn't lose it all to someone who no longer knew the meaning of family. I wasn't a doormat anymore. I wasn't the passive father who just took it. I was a man who had built something from nothing, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it from me without a fight. I sat in my study for a while after that, the weight of what had just happened sinking in deeper with every passing minute. It felt like I was suffocating, like I was caught in a never-ending loop of frustration and disbelief. But I couldn't afford to stay stuck in this place of helplessness. Kelly had made her move, and now it was time for me to make mine. I had spent years fighting for what I had, working tirelessly to build something from nothing. Now it was time to protect it. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew that this wouldn't just be about winning a legal battle. It would be a test of my resolve. But I wasn't about to back down. Not now. Not after everything. The first thing I did was pick up the phone. I called Marcus, my attorney. I'd known Marcus for years, trusted him with all my business dealings, and he was the one person I knew could help me navigate this legal nightmare. I dialed his number, the familiar tone of the phone ringing in my ear. It was almost comforting, like a signal that I wasn't completely alone in this. "Fred," Marcus answered, his voice steady and calm, as always. "What's going on?" I didn't waste time. I jumped straight to the point. "Marcus, Kelly's taken the villa. She gave it to Palmer's parents. I need to figure out what I can do to stop it." There was a pause on the other end, and then Marcus let out a slow sigh. I could almost picture him rubbing his temples, processing everything. "Fred, this is a family dispute, and it could get messy, really messy. You know how these things go." "I don't care about the mess," I said, my voice sharp. "I just need to know how I can protect what's mine. I've worked my whole life for that place, and I'm not about to let them take it from me without a fight." "I hear you," Marcus replied, his tone serious now. "We'll start with the paperwork. Make sure all the legal documents are locked down tight. We'll also need to review any transfers or deeds that have been made. I'm sure there are ways we can protect your interest here, but we need to move fast." I nodded, even though I knew he couldn't see me. "I'll get everything to you. I just need to know what my options are." "First things first," he continued, "let's make sure you have ironclad ownership. If there's any chance they've transferred that property improperly, we can challenge it. But I won't lie, Fred, it's going to be a fight. A long one. A fight." That was exactly what I needed. I couldn't let Kelly get away with this. She had no idea what she had just stepped into. I wasn't some passive old man who would roll over and let her take everything. This was personal, and I was going to make sure I came out on top. I'll have my assistant gather everything and get it to you, I told him, but we need to move quickly. Understood, Marcus said. I'll handle it from here. Just make sure you get me the paperwork as soon as you can. I hung up the phone, my heart still pounding. But for the first time in days, I felt a sense of relief. At least now I had a plan. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and it was something. Next, I reached out to Derek. Derek was my neighbor, and though we didn't talk much outside of casual greetings, I knew he was a tech genius. The guy had a mind that could figure out anything, and over the years, he had done me a few favors here and there. Now, it was time to collect on one of those favors. I knew Derek could help me with something unconventional, something that wouldn't just be about fighting with words or legal battles. I needed an edge, and Derek was the kind of guy who could provide that. I called him, and he picked up after just a couple of rings. "Hey, Fred, what's up?" "Derek, I need your help with something," I said, keeping my tone steady. "I need to make sure I can protect the villa, not just from a legal standpoint, but from a security standpoint too. You know anything about unconventional solutions?" Derek chuckled. "Unconventional? You mean like using tech to mess with people? You know I'm your guy for that." I smirked. Derek had always had a knack for getting creative with technology, and this time I needed his creativity more than ever. I wasn't going to just let Kelly waltz in and take what was mine. I wanted her to feel the consequences of her actions, without breaking the law, of course. I need something that will make it clear that the villa is off limits. I want to make sure Palmer and his parents know they're not welcome. And I want it to be something they can't easily ignore or just walk away from. Something that'll make them think twice about stepping foot on the property again. Derek's voice perked up, and I could hear the wheels turning in his head. "I've got a few ideas, something that will make them really second-guess staying there." "You want to make it psychological, right? Scare them off a bit?" "Exactly," I said, a cold smile creeping onto my face. "I want them to know exactly what they're dealing with. I want them to be uncomfortable in that place, like they're stepping into something they shouldn't be." Derek laughed. "Oh, I can do that. I've got some equipment lying around, and I've always wanted to set up a smart home on steroids. Motion sensors, cameras, voice assistants. We could make the villa a maze of confusion for them. Make them think they're seeing things that aren't there. Ghostly projections, strange noises, you name it." I leaned back in my chair, a dark thought forming in my mind. I want it to be disorienting. I want them to feel like they don't belong there, like they're intruding, and I want to be able to control it remotely. Let's make it impossible for them to ignore. "I love it," Derek said, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "This is going to be fun. I'll start working on it tonight. You get me the keys to the villa, and we'll make sure it's ready to go when they show up." "I'll have everything you need," I said, feeling a surge of satisfaction. "Thank you, Derek." "You got it, Fred. This is going to be a blast. I'll keep you updated." I hung up the phone, feeling like I was finally starting to get some control over the situation. It wasn't just about fighting back with words anymore. I was going to fight back with strategy. And with Derek's help, I would make sure that Kelly and Palmer knew they had messed with the wrong person. The plan was taking shape, and I was more determined than ever to protect what was mine. This wasn't just about a house, it was about respect. It was about taking a stand, and I was ready to do whatever it took to make sure that when Kelly came back, she'd know exactly who she was dealing with. Derek and I worked on it for days, each one feeling longer than the last. There was an electric sense of purpose in the air as we transformed the villa into something no one could possibly expect. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a maze, a puzzle, a place that would make Kelly and her family feel so out of place, so uncomfortable that they would have no choice but to turn around and leave. The house would fight back, and I wasn't going to let up. The plan was simple. Make sure that once they crossed the threshold, they would know, without a doubt, that they didn't belong there, that they were intruders. I wasn't just going to stand by and let Kelly take what was mine. Not after everything. Not after she had dismissed me, erased the years of hard work I had put into this home. It was time to make her feel the consequences of her actions. Derek was practically bouncing off the walls as we installed each component. The man was like a kid in a candy store. His eyes would light up every time he powered up a new sensor or tested a new piece of equipment. "This is going to be epic," he kept saying, as if he were enjoying this just as much as I was. He loved the challenge of it all, the thrill of creating something so unexpected, so powerful. For him, it wasn't just about helping me get my home back. It was about creating something that would truly surprise them. And it was. It was more than I had ever imagined. We set up motion sensors in every room so that every movement would trigger a reaction. The lighting system was next. Smart lights that would flash, dim, and strobe, creating an atmosphere of confusion. And then there were the cameras, hidden in the most unlikely places, ensuring that I could watch every step they took. We programmed the lighting and sound systems to sync perfectly, so that if someone walked into a room, the lights would flash in a disorienting pattern, while eerie sounds filled the air. We didn't want them to feel welcome. We wanted them to feel like they had entered a place they couldn't control, a place that would mess with their minds. The automated voice assistant would be the centerpiece of our plan. It would make announcements at random, things like, "You are trespassing," or "This property is not yours." The sound of footsteps, creaking doors, and whispers would echo through hidden speakers, playing with their minds and making them question what was real. If they moved from one room to another, the sensors would follow them, triggering more lights, more sound, more chaos. The goal was simple: overwhelm them, confuse them, let them feel trapped in a place they didn't understand. We were creating a psychological battleground, but I knew it would work. I could already picture Kelly's face when she realized what she had walked into. The shock, the panic. It would be like nothing she had ever experienced. For years, she had treated me like I was invisible, like my years of hard work meant nothing. Now, it was time to turn the tables. Derek was a genius. I don't think I've ever met anyone who could think through the details like he did. As we worked, he started suggesting things I hadn't even considered. "What if we use projections?" he asked one night, as we sat in the living room, testing some of the effects. "We can project shadows, figures, things that move in the corners of their vision. It will mess with them even more. They'll think they're seeing ghosts." I couldn't help but laugh, though it was more of a dark chuckle. It was perfect, exactly the kind of thing that would make them second-guess everything. "Let's do it," I said, my mind already racing with the possibilities. By the time we were done, the villa had become a labyrinth of smart technology. Every room was rigged to respond to any intruder in ways that would make their heads spin. I wanted Kelly to feel like she was walking into a world she couldn't control, a world that wasn't hers. Every corner, every hallway, every room was designed to confuse, to disorient, and to make her and Palmer feel out of place. I wanted them to know that they weren't welcome and that they could never take my home. I watched Derek work, his hands moving with the precision of someone who truly loved what they did. It was more than just the technology. It was the artistry of it. The way everything had to align perfectly for it to work. I couldn't help but feel a surge of appreciation for him. He was helping me create something far beyond what I had imagined. This wasn't just about making the villa uninhabitable for Kelly. This was about making a statement. The system was finally ready. Derek looked over his work, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "You're going to love this," he said, turning to me with a grin. "It's going to be legendary." And it was. The night before Kelly and her family were supposed to arrive, I went to bed knowing that everything was in place. I had done everything I could to make sure they wouldn't feel welcome. Everything was set up to perfection. And now, it was just a waiting game. When they walked through that door, they wouldn't know what hit them. It wouldn't be the peaceful, welcoming villa they had expected. It would be something else entirely. Something they couldn't explain. Something that would haunt them, even if they never admitted it. The next day, I drove to the villa one last time before the confrontation. The house was quiet as I walked through it, admiring the effects Derek had set up. It was almost surreal. This place that had once been so full of love and memories now felt like a fortress, a psychological maze designed to protect what was mine. I could almost hear Kelly's voice in my head, her laughter from when she thought she could just take it all. But now she would understand that nothing could be taken without a fight. I was ready. And when Kelly and Palmer stepped into my villa, they would understand that they were not in control anymore. I was. It was time for them to feel what it was like to be powerless in a place they had no right to be. Time to make them regret ever thinking they could take what was mine. Time for my revenge. The day had finally arrived. Sunday. The day I had been preparing for. The day when everything would come to a head. It felt like a slow-motion moment, one that had been building up for weeks. But now it was here. I could feel the anticipation in my chest, the excitement of knowing that the moment I had been waiting for was about to unfold. This was it, the moment when I would take back control. From my study in San Diego, I watched the monitors as Kelly, Palmer, and his parents pulled up to the villa. They were laughing, joking as if they had already won. There they were, strolling toward the front door like they owned the place, their confident steps echoing in the stillness of the morning. It was clear they thought they had already conquered what they wanted. They didn't know what was about to happen. They didn't realize that they were walking into a trap that I had set meticulously and carefully. They crossed the threshold, and in that instant, the villa came to life. The lights flashed on in an eerie strobe pattern, casting jagged shadows across the rooms. Water began to pour from every faucet and shower, flooding the house with the sound of rushing liquid. The eerie sounds Derek had programmed filled the air. Whispers, creaking floorboards, footsteps in the distance. The house wasn't just a home anymore. It had become an unpredictable, disorienting maze. It was no longer a peaceful retreat. It was a place that seemed to reject them, to push them out. I could hear them from the audio feeds, their voices rising in panic as they tried to make sense of what was happening. "What the hell is going on?" I heard Palmer's voice crack through the speakers. He sounded disoriented, but also furious. "Why is the water running? Where is this noise coming from?" Kelly's voice followed, sharp and frantic. "This isn't funny, Dad. Turn it off. Palmer, What's going on? But nothing was turning off. Derek's system was working flawlessly. The more they moved, the worse it got. They couldn't escape it. The motion sensors followed them from room to room, triggering more lights, more sounds, more water. Every time they thought they had figured it out, it escalated. It was like being trapped in a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. I could almost feel their confusion, their frustration through the monitors. They were trapped in my web now, a web of their own making. They had underestimated me. They thought they could just walk in and take what was mine, without even a second thought. But now they were the ones who felt powerless. They were the ones scrambling, trying to make sense of the chaos around them. From my vantage point in San Diego, I couldn't help but smile. It was a small smile, one of quiet satisfaction, but it felt like the weight of the world had lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over something again. I wasn't just being trampled by my own family. I wasn't the one who had to step aside and give up everything that mattered to me. I was the one who had finally fought back. I watched Kelly and Palmer, the two people who had taken so much from me, running through the house, their voices rising with each new shock that hit them. I could see them on the screen, their faces wide with panic, their movements becoming increasingly erratic as they tried to find a way out. It was almost surreal. They thought they were in control. They thought they had already won. But they hadn't even realized that they had walked into my trap. "Get the door! Get the door!" Palmer shouted, but the doors wouldn't open. They were locked. Derek had programmed the system so that the house would secure itself against anyone who was unwanted. I could hear Palmer struggling with the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. I could practically feel his frustration boiling over. Good. Let them feel it. Let them feel what it was like to be trapped in a situation they couldn't control. "Dad, please!" Kelly's voice crackled through the speakers, filled with desperation. It was the first time I had heard her sound so small, so vulnerable. The girl who used to rely on me was now begging, but not for help. She was begging for the nightmare to stop. The coldness in her voice had vanished, replaced by something that sounded like real fear. I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. This was my revenge. It wasn't about hurting her. It was about making her understand that I wasn't just going to let her walk all over me anymore. I wasn't going to let her take what was mine, not without consequences. I watched the screen, seeing Kelly and Palmer's movements become more frantic as they tried to figure out how to stop the chaos. The more they tried to regain control, the more the house responded. The lights flashed faster. The water kept running. The sounds grew louder, more overwhelming. They were out of their element now, just like I had been when she told me to leave. Now they understood what it felt like to be powerless in your own home. It was surreal watching them squirm. I had always been the one who had to give in, the one who had to swallow my pride to keep the peace. But now it was their turn. They were the ones on the receiving end of the chaos, and I wasn't going to stop it until they realized the full extent of what they had done. I stayed there, watching the feeds, every moment feeding into the satisfaction building in my chest. The villa had become more than just a house. It had become a statement. It had become a way for me to reclaim what I had lost, to remind them that I wasn't weak, that I wasn't the man they could walk all over. As I watched them scramble, trying to make sense of what was happening, I couldn't help but think that they deserved this. They had taken so much from me, treated me like I didn't matter, like I was disposable, But now, it was my turn. It was my time to make them feel what it was like to be on the other side, to feel trapped, to feel helpless. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim. I didn't feel like the man who had been pushed around, forced to give in. I felt strong. I felt like I was finally standing up for myself. The tide had turned, and I was ready for whatever came next. This was just the beginning. When they finally left, defeated, disoriented, terrified, I sat there, my heart pounding in my chest, watching them retreat into the distance. I didn't feel the kind of joy I thought I might. It wasn't the sight of them running away from the villa that made me feel victorious. It wasn't about the technology or the lights or the eerie sounds that had thrown them into chaos. No, it was something deeper. It was something far more personal. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the weak father who would just bend to every demand. I didn't feel like the man who had to swallow his pride, keep his mouth shut, and let the world walk all over him. No, I was the man who had finally stood up for himself. For once, I hadn't just rolled over. I had fought back, not through anger, but through strategy, through taking control of the situation, through doing what needed to be done, even if it was uncomfortable. It wasn't just about the villa. It was about something much more significant. It was about my dignity, my right to say no, my right to protect what was mine. I had spent so many years trying to be the good father, the one who would give in to keep the peace, the one who thought that if I just kept giving, everything would work out. But this was different. This time, I had made a decision, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. The next morning, I woke up with a clear sense of purpose. The first thing I did was make the call that would change everything. I contacted my attorney, Marcus, and told him what I wanted to do. I had already made up my mind. The villa was no longer mine to give. It was going to a charitable foundation. The Second Chance Foundation for Homeless Assistance would now be its owner. Kelly and her family would never have a claim on it again. They could never come back and take what was rightfully mine. As I sat at my desk watching the papers being processed, I couldn't help but feel a sense of calm wash over me. It wasn't the relief of winning some petty battle. It was something much deeper than that. It was the peace that came with knowing I had done what was right. I had protected what I had built, what Elizabeth and I had shared. And I had done it with grace, not with fury. Later that day, Kelly called. I didn't answer at first. I wasn't sure if I wanted to. But the phone kept ringing, and eventually I picked it up. "Dad, what the hell did you do?" Kelly's voice crackled with anger and confusion, the words rushing out of her like a flood. "I just got a call from Marcus. What do you mean you transferred the villa to a charity? You can't do that. It's mine." I stayed quiet for a moment, letting her words sink in. The anger in her voice was like a punch to the gut, but it was also a confirmation that I had made the right choice. She was upset. She was panicking. But what she didn't understand, what she couldn't see, was that this wasn't about her. It wasn't about what she thought she deserved. It was about me finally standing up for myself, for taking back my dignity. "It's done, Kelly," I said, my voice calm, almost detached. "It's no longer yours. It's been transferred to the foundation. You'll never have a claim on it again." I could almost hear her jaw drop on the other end of the line. There was a long pause, followed by a shaky laugh, full of disbelief. "You can't just do that," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "You can't just take it from us. This isn't fair. I could feel her emotions, anger, regret, disbelief rippling through the phone, but I didn't react. I had long since stopped caring about fairness in her eyes. What had been unfair was how she had treated me, how she had taken everything I had worked for without a second thought. And now she was upset that it was gone, that the one thing she thought she had the right to take was slipping away from her grasp. "No," I said softly. "I didn't take it from you, Kelly. You took it from me. And now it's going to a better place." Her voice cracked with frustration. "You've destroyed everything. You're just doing this to get back at me, aren't you?" I sighed, rubbing my temples. "No, Kelly. This isn't about revenge. It's about me taking control of my life again. It's about me choosing to protect what's mine, even from my own daughter." The line went quiet for a moment, and I could hear her breathing heavily. I knew this was hard for her to accept, but it was the truth. This wasn't about punishment. This was about me protecting my peace, my home, my legacy. And it wasn't just about the house. It was about everything I had sacrificed over the years. "I hope you can understand that," I said, my voice softer now, though still firm. "I'm not just a victim anymore. I'm not someone you can just walk over. I've learned that, finally." There was no response from her, just a long, heavy silence. For a moment, I thought she might hang up on me, but instead, I heard her voice, low and defeated. "I don't know what to say, Dad. I thought you would just give in. I thought you would always be the one to back down." "Well, not anymore," I said quietly. "Not anymore." I hung up the phone, the weight lifting off my shoulders as I did. The silence in my study felt peaceful, almost liberating. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. I went outside, walking to the terrace, and sat down, watching the sun dip below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the lake. It was beautiful, serene, like everything was finally in balance. As the light faded into twilight, I realized something important. I hadn't just fought for a house. I hadn't just fought for a piece of property. I had fought for myself, for my right to stand up for what I had earned, for my right to say no. I wasn't just a victim of Kelly's manipulation anymore. I wasn't someone who would bend to her will, no matter what. I was a man who remembered his worth. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt at peace. The villa may have been gone, but in a way, it had freed me. Freed me from the past. Freed me from the constant guilt and self-doubt. I could move on now, knowing that I had taken back control. And that was more valuable than any house could ever be. As I sat there, watching the sunset, I felt something stir inside me. It was a quiet peace, the kind that comes with knowing you've made the right choice. And for the first time in a long time, I knew that I was going to be okay.